with our focus now on the instructional resources for a online course. This presentation is going to walk you through how to create text-based instructional materials that include both a basic text document in which we can use as to create handouts or study guides or worksheets. This will be the first part of the presentation, and to follow along in terms of the features that we're going to be using, I would suggest that you go to course outcome number 4, find the Word document entitled spacehandout.doc, and open up that file so that you can follow along and experiment with some of the commands and features that we're going to be talking about. Again, to create a basic text document it allows you to use some very basic features of Microsoft Word. You may find as we go through here, and we'll show you in a minute what the features are that we're going to be covering. If you already know these basic commands required to construct this, the basic text-based materials, you will have an option all the way through this program to click and go right to the Hyperbook. So take a look at Space Handouts. Make sure that you're comfortable with what that looks like and how each of the elements was created. And again, start watching this presentation, and later on, if you feel like this is just too basic for you, you can click down at the bottom of our slides and proceed directly to the Hyperbook. Go ahead and click on the next slide. I'm going to try to take you through this presentation the same way as I would if we were doing this face-to-face in class. So some of the slides will take us a little longer to go through, other slides will be fairly quick. This is just an introductory slide, again just reminding you that the basic text offers the learner the advantage of preparing instructional materials such as study guides, handout, and worksheets that are specifically prepared by the instructor. So if you recall the taxonomy of the technology domain, we're at the 5th level now. We are identifying technology for teaching. So we have found materials in other locations, maybe on the website, maybe in some PDF files, maybe in other documents or journals, and we're going to create our own material now that doesn't exist anywhere else into a text-based document for our own online course. All right, let's move on to the next slide, and we'll see where we're going from here. If you found spacehandouts.doc and opened it, you can print it out maybe and use it as we go through this presentation. Or, as I said earlier in the video, you can stop this presentation periodically, maybe after we review a particular feature, and bring up the solar system study guide that is the example here, and see how we created this new study guide from simple Microsoft Word instructions and commands. In addition, notice now from beginning with this slide at the bottom, it says if you have mastered these features, you may click here to proceed to the Hyperbook. So just go ahead and click at the bottom of the screen where it indicates, and this presentation will automatically take you out of the basic text and take you right to the Hyperbook. And if you're ready, we'll take a look at the Microsoft commands that are required to construct text-based materials. Here's the list of menu items for Microsoft Word commands that we're going to be looking at to construct text-based materials. On the left side are some very basic features, and on the right side are some enhanced features that we'll be looking at. So you can take a look at these, and again, if you feel like you know how to do all of these without any problem, you may want to just click on the link down at the bottom of the slide that says you can proceed directly to the Hyperbook. Otherwise, we're going to take a look at all of these commands in order, just to make sure that you're comfortable with how to do some of the basic features of Microsoft Word. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll take a look at some how to open and save documents. Well, let me apologize if the first couple of slides here anyway seems to be way too fundamental. I'm going to assume you know how to open a Word document and save it. So there's a couple of slides here that just show you exactly the commands. You can see at the top left, I've put a box around open, and I put a box around save as. If you know that the difference between save and save as is that in save as you can not only retitle your document, but you can relocate it or locate it where you want it to be in what folder, then you pretty much have the basic features of open and save. One of the things that you ought to think about, though, when you're doing an online course and creating online material is to keep your file name short. If you can create a file name without any spaces inside the file name, as I did with Space Handout, but I did not do with the rubric titles that are above that, just as an example of the better way to do it, then you'll be better off. Because when it comes to loading this material onto a Blackboard site, for example, spaces within a file name sometimes cause a problem, not so much for PC users anymore, but perhaps for Mac users. So just kind of keep that in mind. The simpler the better when you're creating file names, but make them at least meaningful to the user so they can identify them when they're searching for them. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. This slide introduces the editing commands that we're going to take a look at. Again, they're fairly basic, but they're very important. You need to know to get a text-based resource done in a timely manner, you need to know some of the tools and techniques and maybe even a couple of the not so well-known ideas about how to select text, how to change the text appearance, how to move it, and what I think is probably the most important button on the entire Word menu, and that's how to undo something that you might have done incorrectly. All right, so that's where we're headed. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at selecting text. Using the spacehandouts.doc, you can practice the commands as we go through them. To select text, again, you may know that you can simply position the cursor over a word, and you have a couple of choices. You can, if you double click, it will select that word for you. If you're trying to select an entire sentence, go ahead and click on the first word, and then drag your cursor to the last word. That will highlight the entire sentence. And if you want the entire paragraph, you can triple click. So in the example that you see here, I have placed my cursor over any of the words, the Solar System Study Guide, over any of those words, and I have triple clicked to highlight the entire line of text. Now, if I ask you a simple question, again, this will give you an idea of whether you really mastered this kind of the use of the mouse and the selecting of text. What is the definition of a paragraph? Okay. If you know that in Microsoft Word, the definition of a paragraph is the first sentence or the first character of a paragraph all the way down through a return, an enter key. Okay, so when you try to triple click, the definition of a paragraph, what it's going to try to highlight for you is everything from the first character, in this example, the letter T and the, and it will go all the way until it finds a carriage return, which in this case would have been after the word guide. So that's the definition of a paragraph to a computer. All right, let's take a look at, now that we have selected the text, some of the text appearance commands that are available in Microsoft Word that can help us produce a good text-based resource for our online course. If you have used Microsoft Word for any length of time, you're probably quite familiar with the block of the menu at the top that's called Font. Under this particular area are a number of important text appearance commands. Most of us are familiar with the bold, the italic, and the underline, the B, the I, and the U that are part of just about every menu. In addition, just to the right, under the heading called Paragraph, okay, you see that you can left, center, right, and justify your text. Again, most people are probably familiar with that, but just to make sure that you see the location. The example that we're using here, we've highlighted the center function, so you can see how that works. Now remember, the left, center, right, and justify works on a paragraph. It works from the first character of a line to the carriage return. So that's a particularly important function for us when we try to create workbooks or handouts for students. We can left, center, right, or justify both sides of our text. The font and font size, I have a drop-down menu here on the right that shows dozens of theme fonts. Remember, you need to highlight your text first, and once you have it highlighted, then you can go to the drop-down menu for the font and pick the font type that you like. Certain fonts make better better appearance for study guides and workbooks than other fonts. One of my favorite, especially if you're dealing with kind of an elementary school environment, there's one there called Comic Sans, S-A-N-S, which is one of my favorite. It makes the text look somewhat like a comic book. And but what's great about it is it makes it easier to read. Times New Roman is the default that's set up by Microsoft Word in most cases, and it's more than acceptable in our text-based materials that we'll be constructing. Another font that I like quite a bit is called Book Antiqua. You see that about 2/3 of the way down the list. Find a font that you like. Right next to the font, of course, is the font size. When you're dealing in normal text, the standard font size is 12. But when you're creating text-based materials like we're going to be creating, workbooks and study guides and handouts and things, feel free to adjust that to a little larger size. Finally, what you'll see in here is some other commands like the font color. You see the A right now is underlined in red, so any font that we would try to insert into our document now would be red. The others, and these are not always standard, but I like to keep the A. You see the A, the large A, and the smaller A just under the 24. That's not a feature that is typically in a standard Microsoft menu, but you can add them. I've done that. I like that because it allows me, once I highlight the text, to increase the font size or decrease it without having to go to that drop-down menu. All right, so that's some of the ways in which you can you can change the appearance of your text in your handout or study guide. Let's go on now and make sure that you're comfortable with the edit commands on how to move and undo things. The clipboard that you see highlighted here, arrowed here, provides you with some simple commands to cut, copy, and paste. Again, most of us are probably familiar with that. Let me just offer you, if you do a lot of cut, copy, and pasting, you might consider using the series of control keys that allow you to do the same thing perhaps a little bit faster. For example, once you highlight text, you can hit a Control C to copy that information to the clipboard. Now remember, the clipboard is a place in Word and in PowerPoint that we'll see much later that keeps a series or a string of characters that you have copied. When you copy something, you copy it onto the clipboard. Once you copy it, you can click on the paste, or you can click on the scissors to cut. Again, if you like to use keystrokes, and I do because I just think it's much faster. Once I copy something, or once I highlight something, I will Control C to copy it. I'll move my cursor where I want it to go, and I'll Control V to paste it. Okay. You can also use a Control X to cut. So again, your cut is a Control X, your copy is a Control C, and your paste is a Control V, like Victor. The last command we're going to look on here is the arrow at the top, and it looks like a kind of a bent arrow facing off to the left. That's the undo command. Very important for the construction of materials. As you'll see later on, this command exists not only in Word, but it exists in Excel and it exists in PowerPoint. Whatever steps that you have taken, you can undo those steps one at a time by continuously clicking on the undo command. So I found that to be probably the most useful tool on the entire screen, on the entire menu. Okay, that's some of the basic features. Now let's move on and take a look at some of the enhanced features. To produce an effective text-based resource for an online program, you need a little more than just those basic features that we looked at. So again, to make sure that you've grasped these fundamental features, we're going to look at how to insert text. And here we're talking about inserting text that we've probably gleaned off of a website. How to insert clip art, how to use clip art in Microsoft Word. How to insert a picture that we might have downloaded from the internet. We'll spend a slide or so showing you how to do spell and grammar checking. And then finally, how to print your basic text. Remember now, the purpose of creating text-based material is to move both you and your student up the taxonomy of the technology domain into level number 5, which is creating your own materials. So very often you're going to find a website, you're going to find a Word document, you're going to find an online journal that contains information that you're going to want to incorporate into your own personalized instructor-created material. Inserting text, here's an example now. I found a website at Wikipedia about Mars. And I want to save it into my own Word document. Okay, so I'll bring up the website on, let's say, a portion of my screen, a fourth of my screen. I will find the text that I want to copy, and using the features that you learned earlier about selecting text, either words or sentences, or an entire paragraph, because it works the same on a web search engine or a web browser. You can highlight the text. Now, again, the easiest way to do this, if your browser, and they all do, they all offer you the ability to edit. So you can go up to the edit function at the top, and there's always a copy button there. But the easiest way to do it, once you highlight the text, is to use the Control-C that I just mentioned to you. That will copy that text to the clipboard, go back into Microsoft Word, and using the menu that you see at the bottom of the screen, you can paste into a Word document. Remember to position your cursor in the Word document where you want the text to be entered. A simple cut, copy, and paste, or a copy and paste, will allow you to gather information, desired text from a lot of different resources. They all work pretty much the same, especially if you use the Control-C and the Control-V. Then you don't have to worry about where the edit, copy, and paste commands are. They're all the same, and it'll work just fine. Okay, so maybe that's a little tip that will make your development of text-based materials a little easier for you. Remember that inserting text falls under the control of copyright material. So we'll talk about copyrights at some other time, but this is, we're assuming that you have permission to gather this material. We're also assuming for sure that you're going to credit the source from which you get this material. So just because you can do something doesn't mean that you're allowed to. So cut, copy, and pasting, I'm showing you the basic features, but you still have to consider the copyright laws and the fair use laws when you're creating your text-based materials. All right, we'll take a look next at inserting clip art into your material. Inserting clip art is not difficult. It just takes a series of steps and a little bit of practice, particularly for handouts and workbooks. The use of clip art can make that text-based material come alive. To enter the clip art gallery, you want to click on the tab at the top that begins with Insert. So you can see that you can insert a number of things, including tables and pictures, including shapes and so on. And the clip art feature on this example slide is highlighted for you there. So once you click on clip art, it's going to open up the clip art gallery, and it'll be shown on the right side of the screen. So you see here on this example, it says clip art, and then it says search for. So remember, clip art is nothing more than a bunch of pre-designed, I'll call them cartoons, if you will, and they have been added to the gallery by the makers of Microsoft. So when you download or you install Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and so on your computer, one of the features or one of the options that you have is to download the clip art with it. So if for some reason your Microsoft Office on your computer, when you click on clip art, you get nothing. It's because whoever installed Microsoft Office did not use that option. And sometimes, especially for business applications, it might have been installed with just the basic features. And this is actually, the clip art is actually a feature that you have to ask for. So for some reason you do not have clip art on your computer, see if you can find the original install disks and reinstall it with that option. All right, under clip art, you can see I'm searching right now for a planet. That's just a word that I used. When I did that, I found a picture of Mars, or Mercury in this case. And I mean, you have to go down through this list Depending on how you search, you might get a couple of images, you might get a couple dozen images. You can always simply leave that blank, the search blank, click on the Go button, and it will bring up the entire clip art gallery. Could be hundreds of images. You go down through there, find the image that you like. In this case, I wanted that image or that picture of Mercury. When you move your mouse over the top of one of the images, you get that little down arrow bar that's on the right-hand side. It's a blue bar. I think you can see it easily in this picture. If you click on that, then you get a series of menus. One that says insert or copy it. That's typically all you want to go through. You can look at the properties, and we'll talk about preview and property later. So right now, you would just click on the insert, and as you can see from the arrow, when you click on the insert, it will drop that clip art image into the location of your cursor in your Word document. So once you've done that, you want to go ahead and save your document, make sure it's good, and you can also do things like, for example, when you click on the image, you're going to get a series of what are called anchors. Okay, you can see them in the image to the left of the drop-down menu where it says Planet Page 1, Mercury. You can see that when I clicked on that, these little blue anchors have appeared. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 of them. It's always best if you want to use those to resize your image, that you click on one of the 4 corners. And when you click and drag one of the 4 corners, it will expand or contract the image, but it will do it proportionally. If you use one of the 4 anchors that are in the middle of the lines of the images, okay, one of the 4 in the middle, and if you move it, for example, left or right, it's going to resize the image, but it's going to kind of, what's the right word? It's going to stretch it. It'll stretch it for you. So this takes a little bit of practice, but the clip art is actually extremely useful for creating text-based materials, especially basic documents. Putting something in your document that kind of spruces it up a little bit, if you will, but here's the overriding consideration. Don't use clip art, don't insert any kind of pictures or anything else into your document unless it contributes to the learning. Don't do it just to say you know how to do it, or even worse, putting images in there that have nothing to do with the content that you're trying to explain or trying to present, because it just confuses the student. All right, so that's how to insert clip art. Now, again, clip art is provided in the gallery. Most of us have images and pictures that we would like to insert ourselves, things that we've taken on a digital camera, images that we have saved from a website, and so on. So let's take a look at how to do that. We're going to learn a concept of harvesting, which is the ability to download images from the internet. When I was teaching at a local Catholic university, my students would talk to me a lot about whether it was appropriate to download images from the internet. Aren't we stealing them? And I said, well, you know what? This is a Catholic institution. We don't steal anything. So let's invent this term called harvesting. But the bottom line is, the same caveat that I gave you earlier about cut, copy, and pasting text holds for images as well. And we'll actually do a presentation later on copyright issues. But for now, we're looking at the process of how to download images from the internet. The easiest way to do that, once you have decided on the lesson that you're going to present to your students, is to use the search engine, or whether it's Google or another engine, doesn't really matter, because they all work pretty much the same way in terms of how to get and locate appropriate images. You can see the example here. I've entered the term Abraham Lincoln on my Google search engine, and it has brought back for me a number of websites. As you can imagine, there's literally millions of websites about Abraham Lincoln. But up at the top of the screen, you see the command of images. So if you will click on that, instead of seeing a whole series of websites, as you do kind of on the left side of the screen, you'll see a continuing menu of images, like I've shown you on the right side. So I've kind of superimposed the menu of images onto this site, so it would save us a little bit of time. As you move your mouse over each of these images, a pop-up screen will show you some of the specific properties. For example, this one image of Lincoln that we have here that's kind of expanded shows its file name. It looks like slide 4, and it's a GIF file. We don't really care that much. Underneath that, it shows you the website that it's located. But most importantly, underneath that, it shows you the size of the image. And all things being equal, if you have a choice between a couple of images that you really like, always select the larger file. And you might imagine why, because you're going to take this image and you're going to drop it into a PowerPoint presentation. If it's a very small image, and you try to make it bigger in your Word document, it's going to start looking pixelated, is the term they use. It starts to look blocky, right? But if you take a large file and it's too big, you can always shrink it down, and it will continue to have the same clear image. So again, all things being equal, if you've got two images that you really like, go ahead and select the larger image. Now, once you find an image that you like, this is not the image that you want to capture. These images are called thumbnails, and they're very, very small. If you were to try to save the image that you see here on this slide, the images are only 4 or 5K. They're very small, so that they can put them in a long menu and you can choose what you want. If you find an image that you like, instead click on the image itself. And as you will see on the next slide, it will take you to the website where that image is located. So let's go to the next slide now and see what we do next. All right, just a little bit of reinforcement here. As I said at the end of the last slide, do not attempt to save the thumbnail that is presented in the search engine. Instead, click on it and go to the actual website. Once you do that, it will bring up a pop-up of the actual image that you were interested in, and it's giving you the full image. In the last slide, it showed it was like 320 by 240, so it gives you the full up image. All right. Now, once you see that on the screen, like you see here on the example, take your mouse, put it over the top of the image, and do a right mouse click. When you do that, you'll get this drop-down menu that you see on the screen. Scroll down until you find Save Picture As. Go ahead and click on that, and it will open up the very familiar dialog box that will allow you to save that picture in any of the folders that are on your computer, or you might even save it to the desktop. Now, here's probably the most important tip that I'm going to give you as we begin to create our own resources, whether they're text-based or visual-based. And that is, as you begin to save all of these materials for your course, if you create PowerPoint presentations or you're create text or visual-based materials, put them all in one single folder. Now, I've had students that have said, well, I'm going to put all my images over here, and I'm going to put all my PowerPoints over here, and I'm going to put all my Word documents over here, and they have them in different folders. That causes or can cause a problem when you're trying to export your materials, when you try to move them or from one computer to another. So let's say you're going to take this presentation or this material file that you're creating, and you're going to upload it into Blackboard, because that is exactly what you're going to do. Well, if your Word document is in one file or one folder, and your images, your Abraham Lincolns, is in another folder, Blackboard can sometimes get confused. All right, and PowerPoint can get confused as well. So it's an issue that's broader than any one particular platform. All right, and so, for example, in a PowerPoint presentation, when it says go get an image, it's looking for that image in the same folder that the PowerPoint presentation was in. And if it can't find it, it's going to draw a blank for you. And the easiest way to solve that is simply to put everything in one single folder. Now, I'm going to insist that you do that for our course. And the reason I do that is because when it comes time for you to upload this material into Blackboard or to send it to me for review, the easiest way to ensure that all the images and all the photos and all the movies are in the same, are transferred at the same time is if they're in the same folder. So use that as a guide for what you're doing here at in our course. Okay. All right. Now, once you have harvested your images, then we can move on now to the back to our Word document and look at the enhanced feature that talks about how to insert a picture. So let's get ready to move on. Inserting a picture into a Word document is very similar to inserting clip art. You go to the tab at the top called Insert, click on that. Then you'll click on the picture icon, and it will open up the dialog window. At that point, you want to locate the picture that you just harvested. If you put it in the same folder as your as your Word document, it's going to be very simple. All your images will be in the same place. Your .doc file will be in there, along with anything else that you're going to create. And that's why I was saying it's just easier to do that. So navigate to the folder that has your images. You select the images simply by clicking on it. Or you can double click on it, or you can click on it once and use the insert button at the bottom of the that you see at the bottom of the screen. And when you do that, the image will be inserted into your Word document the same way as the clip art did. From here, it works exactly the same as clip art. You can click on the image, you can resize it, you can relocate it, you can also cut, copy, and paste it. So try that a few times. Make sure that you can insert images into your Word document. And then, of course, as soon as you get it where you want it and the size that you want it, go ahead and save the file so that you don't lose anything that you've just finished. So inserting clip art and inserting images is part of a good text-based basic document. All right, next we're going to look at another enhanced feature very quickly, how to do spell checking and grammar checking. Spelling and grammar checking is just an integral part of any good construction of text-based materials. And using Microsoft Word, it's just so easy. Across the tabs at the top of the menu is the Review tab. If you'll click on that, you'll see spelling and grammar checking as the leftmost icon. When you click on that, Microsoft Word will automatically go through all of the text in your document and identify for you words that it does not recognize. Remember, just because a word pops up, it does not mean it's misspelled. It just simply means that it's not in the dictionary. So it's up to you to decide whether you want to ignore that word or change it, whether you want to add it to your dictionary or leave it out. So if you have never tried the spelling and grammar checker, and most of the time what it finds with grammar errors are not real errors, but they're fragments of sentences, which is very common when we create our own text-based documents, especially if we're trying to set up something like a study guide or a worksheet. So again, but run it through the grammar checker, the spelling checker. It will simply identify things that pop up. Make the necessary corrections or tell it to ignore it. And once you have finished your checking, it will go back to the original document. And then again, make sure that you save it so that it has the most current, revised, and correct version of your document. Okay, I think we're about ready to wrap up our look at text-based documents by looking at how to print. So let's go to the next slide and we'll run through some of our print options. You want to become familiar with all of the enhanced printing features so that you can make hard copies of the text-based materials for your students. Not so important for us because we're creating online courses. But for many students, they actually want a hard copy. So I would simply encourage your students in your distance courses to take the material, take the document, and produce their own hard copy if that's how they like to study better. Under the File option, at the File tab at the top menu, you click on that. You can scroll down to your print options. And once you click on that, notice that you have options to do a preview. I don't print anything anymore unless I preview it first. Just simply saves me a lot of paper and ink. You have the ability under settings to print all of your pages or just a certain range of pages. You have the option to print one-sided or two-sided if your printer can accommodate that. And the other thing that's important for our purposes right now is numbers of copies. So again, this takes a little bit of practice. Open up the print menu, make sure that you know how to use all of the full features that are afforded to you by the Microsoft Word program. And once you've done the printing, I think we're ready to wrap up our basic text document. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Before we finish looking at the basic text, let me just bring up a couple of graphic images of the Solar System Study Guide and point out how the features of Microsoft Word that we've looked at so far can be implemented in an actual text-based document. For the material that you're going to create for your online course, use the study guide here as kind of a guide for some of the features that I'd like to see populated into your course. On the cover page, for example, we use a clip art image. Could just as easily be a picture that you downloaded from the internet. Any good basic Word document that we use for study guides or worksheets or whatever, make sure you have the indicative data listed there, the student's name, date of the lesson, and the teacher. You'll also notice on this first page that there's some instructions to the student about how to fill out Word document. Again, that's one of the real advantages of text-based material. You can use it as a study guide, you can use it as a worksheet, and you can use it as an assessment tool and have the student download the document, open it up, fill out the information, complete an essay question that might be here, or do some true, false, or multiple choice, and then obviously they can save it and send it right back to you. So it's a very useful vehicle for online courses. So make sure the instructions are there. Notice that I've used a little bit of color, text color. That's always optional. You can do that if you'd like. And then I've also included some links for them to review as they go through the study guide and pick up the information that they need to complete this learning objective. So in your basic text document, please include some HTTP, some URL, some web addresses as part of the document. All right, we're going to go take a look now at the rest of the document. So go ahead and move on to the next page. Most of the Guide to the Solar System study guide here includes this format. There's actually one page for each of the 9 planets. When I first did this example, Pluto was still a planet, so whether you consider it one or not, you'll see that as part of the study guide. But again, look at what we've done here. I've used text color for the appearance. I have included photos and clip art. There's some text that I've downloaded from the internet, but most importantly, on this particular example page, we have inserted a table. It's a very simple process to do. It's under the insert command and one of the leftmost icons, so you can insert a table and put your quick facts about each of your planets there. Also notice that I've laid out some space down at the bottom of each of these pages for class notes. Again, just an example. So for your text-based document, please include many of these features that you see here: inserting text, inserting pictures or clip art, and then we'll show you the last page of the handout and talk about it next. On the last page of the study guide is an example of how I completed the basic text with an element of a summative assessment. So after this learning objective, after you've completed the interactive lesson in this case, here's a way for you to get some feedback from your students. So I'd like you to include this feature in your basic text. I'm not hard over on which format you use. This is an example of a true-false. You could easily make a multiple choice, or you can even ask an essay question. So those are the key elements that I want you to use in the construction of your basic text. We've looked at a bunch of features in Microsoft Word, the open and save, the edit commands, and the enhance features. Use those in the creation of your own text-based material for your online course. Please proceed to the next slide as we complete our review of the basic text. Oh, well done. We have completed all of the features of Microsoft Word that are necessary to complete the basic text document for creating our own resources. Again, it can be prepared to provide your students with teacher-made materials. That's what's important here. We're not downloading somebody else's materials. We're creating our own documents based on the learning objectives that we find important when delivering our instruction online. Instructors can get their materials from a variety of sources that we talked about. We can cut, copy, and paste text. We can harvest images. And we can create create very quickly important student learning materials just by using the basic functions of Microsoft Word. The next thing we want to do, though, is look at some advanced features. We're going to look at the Hyperbook next. So let's finish out this presentation, part of the presentation, by looking at the next slide where we give you some options. We are ready to move on to our review of the Hyperbook, which is again a more complex Word document that has more features and more elements to it. At this point, you have your choice of what you want to do. If you click on the icon, the first icon, you'll proceed to the Hyperbook. If you feel comfortable that you've mastered these basic features, that's the option you want to choose. There's an icon there that looks like a home button, and that's exactly what it is. That will return you to the beginning of this presentation if you skipped over something or you want to review any of the basic features. And finally, you can end the presentation right now, and you can come back and look at the construction of the Hyperbook at a later time. So those are your three options. Go ahead and click on one of those items, and we'll finish this part of the presentation at this time.